Revna didn't know the rider approaching her gates was the man who had shattered her 5 years ago. She didn't know he had spent 3 months tracking her across territories, bribing informants, and swallowing the kind of pride that once made him untouchable. And she definitely didn't know that the words he carried would drag her back into a world she had clawed her way out of, one scar at a time. All she knew was that Thornhaven's eastern wall needed reinforcing before the winter storms, and her mason was 3 days late with the stone shipment. Someone at the gates. Alpha. Revna looked up from the supply ledger, finding Girath in the doorway of her study. Her second-in-command was a wall of muscle and calm, the kind of man who could break bones with his bare hands and still remember to bring her tea when she forgot to eat. His expression now, however, was anything but calm. "A traitor?" she asked, setting down her quill. "No." Girath hesitated, something he never did. "He's wearing the crest of Valdris." The name hit her like a blade between the ribs. Valdris. The northern kingdom of silver forests and ancient bloodlines. The kingdom she had almost been queen of before its king had decided she wasn't worth the cost. Revna's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. "What does Valdris want with Thornhaven?" "He's asking for you by name. Says he won't leave until he speaks with you." "Then let him freeze at the gates. I have no business with anyone from that territory." Girath shifted his weight. "Revna, it's not just anyone, it's him. It's Kalis." The world went silent. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, drowning out everything else. Kalis. The Alpha King of Valdris. The man who had promised her forever under a harvest moon, then ripped out her heart in front of 300 witnesses. "Send him away," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He says it's urgent. Life or death." Everything was life or death with him. Revna stood, turning toward the window that overlooked her territory. Thornhaven spread beneath her, a patchwork of stone cottages, training yards, and the great thorned wall that gave the pack its name. She had built this from nothing, from the ashes of who she used to be. She would not let him take it from her. "Tell him," she said slowly, "that the woman he's looking for died 5 years ago. Whatever he wants, he can find it somewhere else." Girath didn't move. "He said you'd say that. He also said to give you this." He crossed the room and placed something on her desk. A ring. Simple iron band, etched with a pattern of interlocking thorns. Revna's breath caught. Her mother's ring. The one Revna had thrown at Kalis's feet the night he rejected her, the night he chose a political alliance over their mate bond, the night he stood before the gathered packs and declared that Revna of the lowlands was nothing to him. He had kept it. For 5 years, he had kept it. "Damn him," she whispered. "Should I still send him away?" Revna stared at the ring, memories clawing at her. Her mother's hands, worn from work, slipping this ring onto Revna's finger the day she left home. "For when you find where you belong," she had said. Revna had believed she'd found that place in Valdris, in Kalis's arms. She had been catastrophically wrong. "No," Revna said finally. "Bring him to the Great Hall. Let him see what I've become. Let him choke on it." Girath nodded and disappeared. Revna picked up the ring, turning it over in her fingers. The iron was cold, and something about it made her stomach knot in ways she thought she had burned out of herself long ago. She pocketed the ring and went to meet her past. The great hall of Thornhaven was nothing like the gilded splendor of Valdris. It was rough-hewn timber and stone, banners dyed in deep green and black, a massive hearth that crackled with warmth against the mountain chill. It was real in a way Valdris had never been. Revna sat in the Alpha's chair, carved from the trunk of a thornwood tree that had stood for 400 years. She had earned this seat, bled for it. She would not give Kalis the satisfaction of seeing her stand. The doors opened, and there he was. 5 years had changed him. The boyish softness was gone, replaced by hard lines and sharper angles. His dark hair was longer, pulled back from a face that looked like it had forgotten how to sleep. His jaw was shadowed with stubble, his traveling clothes mud-stained and worn, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only star in his sky, those were the same. Except now they carried something she had never seen in them before: desperation. Kalis stopped at the center of the hall, flanked by Giraffe and two of Thornhaven's warriors. He looked around slowly, taking in the hall, the banners, the throne. When his gaze finally settled on Revna, something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or regret. Good. Alpha Revna. His voice was rougher than she remembered. Thank you for seeing me. I haven't decided if I'm seeing you yet. She kept her tone flat. I'm deciding whether to have you thrown out or thrown into the cells. You have 60 seconds to convince me of a third option. I deserve that. You deserve far worse. 50 seconds. Kalis took a breath. My kingdom is dying. A curse has spread through Valdris for the past 8 months. My people are turning into something wrong. Shadow creatures that don't recognize their own families. We've lost 2 villages entirely. The curse spreads faster each month. And this concerns Thornhaven how? It doesn't. It concerns you. His eyes locked onto hers. You're a Veilwalker, Revna. The only one left in the 5 territories. You can see into the Shadow Realm. Track what moves there. Find the source. You're the only one who can stop this. Revna's fingers tightened on the armrest. The Veilwalking gift, the ability to step between the living world and the realm of shadows, was something she had spent years hiding. How did he know? I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Yes, you do. Kalis stepped forward, and the guards moved to stop him. He ignored them. I know about the night your mother died. I know what you did to save your younger brother, walking into the Shadow Realm to pull him back from death's edge. I know you've been hiding it because Veilwalkers are hunted, feared, killed for power they can't control. If you knew all this, why didn't you expose me 5 years ago? Would have made your rejection even easier to justify. The words were a blade, and she watched them land. Kalis flinched. I would never have... He stopped, a muscle jumping in his cheek. I kept your secret. I've always kept it. How noble of you. Revna stood, descending the steps slowly. You kept my secret while you threw me away like garbage, while you stood before the gathered packs and declared our mate bond broken, while you married Celeste of the Northern Shores to secure your precious alliance. She stopped 3 feet from him, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes. Tell me, Kalis, how is your queen? Does she know you're here, begging at another woman's door? His expression cracked. Celeste is dead. 18 months ago. The shadow curse took her first. Revna felt the information land strangely, neither satisfaction nor sorrow, just a hollow kind of acknowledgement. I'm sorry for your loss. No, you're not. No, she agreed. I'm not. 30 seconds left. Kalis reached into his coat and withdrew a folded piece of parchment. His hand trembled slightly as he held it out. It's not just my people. My sister, Ilara. She was taken 3 weeks ago during a shadow attack. Whoever is behind this curse, they have her. The shadows swallowed her whole, and I cannot reach her. His voice fractured on the last words. She's 16 years old, Revna, the same age you were when we first met. Please, I am begging you. The Alpha King of Valdris, begging. The man who had been too proud to chase after her when she fled his kingdom in disgrace. The man who had chosen politics over the bond that had sung between their souls. Now he stood in her hall, shaking, broken, asking for her help. Revna should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous. She felt the ghost of what she had once felt for him. Even if I wanted to help you, she said quietly, why would I? You destroyed me, Kalis. You looked me in the eyes and told me I was worth less than a treaty. You expect me to forget that? No. His voice was raw. I expect you to hate me forever. But I also know you. The girl who cried when she found an injured fox in the forest and spent 3 days nursing it back to health. The woman who walked into the shadow realm to save her brother, even though it could have killed her. He stepped closer. You won't let a 16-year-old girl die because her brother is a monster. That's not who you are. You don't know who I am anymore. Then show me. He held her gaze. Show me who you've become. And if you still want me gone afterward, I'll leave. I'll walk out of Thornhaven and never trouble you again. But give me one chance. That's all I'm asking. One chance to make this right. Revna studied him. The proud king, humbled. The man who had everything, now with nothing but a desperate plea. She remembered the night of their bonding ceremony, the way he had looked at her like she was his salvation right before he tore everything apart. She had sworn she would never be weak for him again. Jarath, she said, not looking away from Kalis. Prepare a room in the East Wing. The Alpha King of Valdris will be staying tonight. Before the hope could fully bloom on his face, she added, We'll discuss terms in the morning. And Kalis, if I don't like what I hear, you'll leave Thornhaven with nothing, just like I left Valdris. She turned and walked away before he could respond. Revna didn't sleep that night. She stood at her window, watching the moon trace its path across the sky, the same moon that had witnessed her bonding ceremony 5 years ago. The same moon that had watched Kalis break her. The memory was a wound that never fully healed. The great hall of Valdris, draped in silver and white. 300 guests from the allied packs. Revna in her ceremonial gown, a crown of mountain flowers in her hair. She had never felt more beautiful, more certain. Kalis would speak the bonding words, their souls would intertwine, and she would become his queen. She hadn't known then what had happened the night before, how Lord Brennan had delivered a sealed letter to Kalis's chambers, how her future mate had read it with his face draining of color, how he had paced until dawn trying to find another way. All she had known was the moment Kalis stepped forward and said the words that ended everything. I cannot complete this bond. The words had fallen like stones into still water. The hall went silent. Kalis. The northern shores have offered alliance through marriage. Lady Celeste will become Queen of Valdris. It is the only way to prevent war. What about us? What about the bond? He had looked at her then, his storm-gray eyes cold, shuttered, unrecognizable. There is no bond. There never was. He had said it loudly enough for every guest to hear, loudly enough to brand her as a liar, a pretender, a desperate low-born girl who had imagined her connection to the king. Revna had felt something inside her crack, not just her heart, her very sense of self. She had thrown her mother's ring at his feet and walked out of Valdris with nothing but the clothes on her back. No one had tried to stop her. Now, 5 years later, the man who had done that to her was sleeping in her east wing, waiting to ask for her help. The irony was suffocating. A knock at her door pulled her from the memory. Come in. Jorath entered, carrying 2 cups of something that steamed in the cold air. He handed her one without asking if she wanted it. You should sleep. Can't. Revna wrapped her hands around the cup. He's here, Jorath. In my home. The man who... I know. Jorath's voice was gentle. He had found her 3 years ago, half dead and feral in the northern woods, and had been the one to bring her to Thornhaven. He knew her story. I also know you wouldn't have let him stay if you weren't considering his request. I'm not considering anything. You kept the ring. Revna's hand moved unconsciously to her pocket, where the iron band still sat. That doesn't mean anything. Then why not throw it at him again? She had no answer for that. Jorath settled into the chair by the fire, his massive frame somehow fitting into the worn leather. Tell me about the girl, his sister. Alara. Revna remembered her vaguely, a bright-eyed child who used to follow Kalis around the castle like a shadow. She was 11 when I left. Sweet, curious, always asking questions about everything. And now she's been taken by whatever's causing this curse. If he's telling the truth? Do you think he's lying? Revna considered this. Kalis was many things. Proud, stubborn, capable of cruelty when he believed it was necessary. But he had never been a liar. Even when he'd broken their bond, he hadn't lied. He'd simply chosen duty over love and hadn't pretended otherwise. No, she admitted. He's not lying. He's terrified. I could see it in him. Then what's stopping you from helping? He destroyed me, Jorath. The words came out harsher than she intended. He took everything I was and burned it to the ground. And now he shows up expecting me to save him? To walk into the shadow realm? Which could kill me. To rescue his sister? Where was this concern for my welfare when he threw me away? Jorath was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'm not suggesting you forgive him. I'm asking if you can live with yourself if the girl dies. The question hit too close to home. Revna thought of her own brother, Tam, the night she had walked into the shadows to pull him back. She'd been 17, untrained, and acting on pure instinct and desperation. It had nearly killed her. But Tam was alive today because she had taken that risk. Could she really condemn another young girl to death just because her brother had wronged her? Damn you, she muttered, but there was no heat in it. I'll take that as a yes. It's not a yes. It's a, maybe I'll hear him out in the morning. Revna drained her cup and set it aside. But I'm not doing this for free. If the Alpha King wants my help, he'll pay a price that makes him bleed. Jorath's lips twitched. Now that's the Alpha I know. Revna made Kalis wait until noon. Let him stew, she thought as she went about her morning routine. Let him wonder whether she would appear at all. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty she had carried for months after leaving Valdris, not knowing where her next meal would come from, whether she would survive the winter. When she finally entered the great hall, Kalis was standing by the window, his back rigid with tension. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and she saw the shadows under his eyes had deepened. He hadn't slept either. Good. You look terrible, she said by way of greeting. You look like a queen. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise at his own candor, then careful blankness. Revna ignored the flutter in her chest. She was dressed for power today, leather and dark wool, her hair braided back in the style of Thornhaven warriors. No ceremonial gowns, no flower crowns. She was not the girl he remembered. Sit, she commanded, taking her place in the Alpha's chair. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Kalis sat across from her, his movements careful, like he was approaching a wild animal. 8 months ago, a patrol in the eastern forest reported something strange, a shadow that moved against the wind. They tried to track it, but it vanished. 2 days later, 3 wolves from that patrol turned. They attacked their own packmates in the night. Their eyes were black, empty. They didn't recognize anyone, didn't respond to commands. We had to put them down. And it spread from there? Slowly at first. 1 or 2 wolves every few weeks. We thought it was a sickness, some kind of infection. Our healers tried everything. His voice tightened. Then whole villages started turning. Overnight. Families who went to sleep normal and woke up as monsters. The shadow isn't just corrupting wolves. It's consuming them, erasing who they were. And your sister? Kalis's hands clenched on his knees. Alara was investigating. She'd found references in the old texts, accounts of something similar happening centuries ago. A shadow plague. The records said it was stopped by a Veil Walker who tracked the source to the Shadow Realm and destroyed it. So she went looking for a Veil Walker? She went looking for you. His eyes met hers. She remembered you from before, said you were the kindest person she'd ever met. She believed you would help, even if I didn't deserve to ask. He paused. 3 weeks ago, while searching the eastern ruins, she was taken. The shadows rose up and swallowed her. My scouts saw it happen. There was nothing left. Nothing left doesn't mean she's dead. No. Our seers confirmed she's still alive, trapped somewhere in the Shadow Realm. But none of them can reach her. Kalis leaned forward. You're the only one who can walk between worlds, Revna. The only one who can bring her back. Revna studied him. The desperation was real, raw in a way that couldn't be faked. But she needed more. Why did you reject our bond? The question came out sharper than intended, and she watched him flinch. Revna. You want my help, you answer my questions. That's how this works. She crossed her arms. You had the Northern Alliance eating out of your hand. Your father's treaties were ironclad. There was no threat of war. So why did you suddenly need to marry Celeste so badly that you humiliated me in front of every pack in the region? Kalis was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strained. It was complicated. There were factors you didn't... Don't. Revna's voice cut through his excuse. Don't insult me with half-truths. I spent 2 years believing I imagined our bond, that I was some pathetic girl who invented a connection that wasn't there. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Yes. The word was quiet, pained. I know exactly what it did. I watched you walk away, and I couldn't... He stopped, his expression haunted. Couldn't what? Couldn't chase after me? Couldn't tell me the truth? Couldn't choose me? Couldn't protect you any other way. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. The confession hung in the air, heavy with implications. Revna stared at him. What do you mean? Protect me. Kalis looked away, tension radiating from his shoulders. I can't explain. Not yet. There are things in motion that I don't fully understand, and until I do... You expect me to trust you when you won't tell me the truth? I expect you to hate me. He met her gaze again, and the rawness there made her breath catch. I expect you to make me grovel and suffer for what I did. But I'm asking you to help Alara anyway. She's innocent in all of this. She's not me. Revna's mind raced. Protect her. What could that possibly mean? He had destroyed her. How was that protection? But the questions would have to wait. Right now, a 16-year-old girl was trapped in the Shadow Realm, and every day Revna delayed was another day Alara spent in darkness. If I do this, Revna said slowly, I have conditions. Hope flickered in Kalis's eyes. Anything. First, I'm not going to Valdris. Whatever I need from the Shadow Realm, I'll access from here. Thornhaven's wards are strong, and I'm not leaving my pack undefended. Agreed. Second, you stay here as insurance. If something happens to me in the Shadow Realm, Jorith will hold you personally responsible. My pack will have their pound of flesh. Kalis swallowed but nodded. Agreed. Third, she paused, savoring this one. When this is over, you owe me a debt. Not gold, not land. A favor of my choosing to be called in whenever I see fit. And you cannot refuse it, no matter what it is. His eyes narrowed. That's a dangerous card to give someone who hates you? Yes, it is. Revna smiled without warmth. Those are my terms. Take them, or leave. Kalis studied her for a long moment. She saw him weighing the risks, the pride battling the desperation. Finally, he extended his hand. I accept. Revna clasped his forearm, the traditional seal of a pact between alphas. The moment their skin touched, something jolted through her. A flash of electricity, a whisper of something ancient and buried. The mate bond, dormant for 5 years, stirred in her chest like embers refusing to die. She released him quickly, stepping back. "I'll need objects connected to Alara," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the racing of her pulse. Things she touched recently, carried close. The stronger the emotional connection, the better. "I have her journal, a bracelet she always wore, some letters. Bring them to me tonight. I'll begin at moonrise." Revna turned away, unable to look at him anymore, unable to ignore the way her hand still tingled where she had touched him. "Revna," his voice stopped her at the door. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve—" "You're right. You don't." She didn't look back. "But your sister does. That's the only reason you're still in my hall." She left before he could respond, before the burning in her eyes could become something more embarrassing. She had sworn she would never be weak for him again, so why did her heart feel like it was breaking all over? The moon hung low over Thornhaven when Revna began her preparations. She had converted one of the storage rooms beneath the great hall into a ritual space. Stone walls, no windows, and a floor painted with protective wards she had learned from her mother's journals. Candles flickered at the cardinal points, casting shadows that danced like living things. Jorath stood guard outside the door. Kalis had insisted on being present, but Revna had refused. "The Shadow Realm responds to emotion," she had told him. "Whatever unresolved feelings exist between us will only make the crossing more dangerous. You stay outside." He hadn't argued. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he was simply too desperate to risk pushing her. Now, alone in the candlelit chamber, Revna spread Alara's belongings across the stone floor. The journal, leather-bound and worn at the edges. The bracelet, delicate silver links with a small wolf charm. 3 letters in Alara's handwriting, the ink slightly smudged as if she had written them in haste. Revna picked up the journal first, letting her fingers trace the cover. She had explained the basics of veil walking to Kalis, but not the full truth of it. Not the way it felt to step between worlds, like being unmade and remade with every breath. Not the way the shadows whispered, offering truths and lies in equal measure. Not the way she sometimes feared she would lose herself entirely in that dark space between. She closed her eyes and reached. The crossing hit her like a wave of ice water. One moment she was in the stone chamber, solid and real. The next, she was elsewhere. The Shadow Realm was not darkness, not exactly. It was the absence of light given form, a world of muted grays and shifting shapes where nothing stayed constant. The ground beneath her feet felt like packed earth but looked like smoke. The sky above was starless, endless, a void that seemed to breathe. Revna steadied herself, clutching Alara's journal like an anchor. The girl's essence clung to it, a golden thread in the grayness, pulling her forward. She followed. The landscape shifted as she walked, responding to her presence or perhaps to her memories. She passed through what might have been a forest, trees made of shadow that reached for her with branch-like fingers. She crossed a river that whispered her name in voices she almost recognized. And then she saw it. A fortress rose from the darkness, its towers twisted and wrong, like something that had been built by hands that didn't understand architecture. It pulsed with a sickly light, green-black and rotten, and even from a distance Revna could feel its malevolence. Alara was inside. She could feel the girl's presence, faint but alive, like a candle flame guttering in the wind. Revna approached the fortress walls, pressing her hand against the shadow stone. Images flooded her mind. Alara, chained in a room without doors, her eyes closed, her body still, suspended in a sleep that wasn't natural. Figures moving around her, speaking in a language Revna didn't recognize. One figure turning, and for a moment, just a moment, Revna saw a face. She gasped, jerking her hand back. No, that was impossible. The face she had seen, twisted by shadow but still recognizable, belonged to someone who should have been dead. Someone who had been executed for treason 15 years ago, long before Revna had ever set foot in Valdris. Lord Marin, Kaelis's uncle. The man who had tried to usurp the throne when Kaelis was just a child. But he was dead. Everyone knew he was dead. Kaelis's father had ordered the execution himself. Unless he wasn't. Unless the execution had been a lie. The shadows around Revna began to thicken, pressing in, sensing her intrusion. She didn't have much time. She pushed deeper, trying to see more, trying to understand. Lord Marin standing over Alara, his hand on her forehead. The bond was supposed to break him, he was saying to someone Revna couldn't see. Instead, he grew stronger, found allies, built defenses I cannot penetrate. A pause. But the girl will serve. When he comes for her, and he will come, we will have him. A second voice, female, cold as winter. And the Veilwalker? She's involved now. I saw her threads in the web. The Veilwalker is an unexpected complication. Marin's smile was cruel. But not an unwelcome one. She has power we can use. And she has history with my nephew that makes her pliable. You think she'll turn against him? I think she already hates him. We simply need to give her a reason to act on it. The vision fractured. The shadows lunged. Revna ran. She tore through the shadow realm, following the thread of her own essence back toward her body. The fortress screamed behind her, a sound that wasn't sound, and she felt things grasping at her heels, hungry and ancient. She burst through the veil and slammed back into her body with enough force to knock over 3 candles. The stone chamber materialized around her, solid and real and blessedly present. Revna gasped for air, her lungs burning, her skin covered in cold sweat. The journal had fallen from her hands, its pages splayed open to a sketch Alara had made of her brother. The door burst open. Revna! Kaelis was beside her in an instant, his hands gripping her shoulders. What happened? You were gone for over an hour. The candles started flickering, and then you screamed. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her hands were shaking, and she could still feel the shadows clinging to her edges, reluctant to let go. I found her. Alara. She's alive. The relief that flooded his face was almost painful to witness. Where? Can we reach her? She's being held in a fortress in the deep shadow. It's protected, warded against intrusion. I couldn't get inside, only glimpse what was happening. Revna met his eyes. Kaelis, there's something you need to know. What? Your uncle is alive. Lord Marin. He's the one behind the curse, the one holding Alara. Kaelis went pale. That's impossible. My father executed him. I was there. I saw. You saw what he wanted you to see. Revna pulled herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Kaelis's hand steadied her elbow and she let him, too exhausted to protest. Whatever happened 15 years ago, Marin survived. He's been in the Shadow Realm this whole time, building power, planning something. Planning what? Revna hesitated. The words Marin had spoken echoed in her mind. The bond was supposed to break him. What bond? Her bond with Kaelis? Had Marin somehow been behind the rejection, the broken ceremony, the years of pain? She needed more information before she accused. Before she let herself hope that maybe, Kaelis hadn't chosen to hurt her after all. I don't know yet, she said, but he's using Alara as bait. He knows you'll come for her. He's counting on it. Kaelis's expression hardened. Then we don't go. We find another way. There is no other way. Revna cut him off. The fortress exists in the Shadow Realm. Only a Veilwalker can reach it. And the longer we wait, the weaker Alara gets. She's being drained, Kaelis. Whatever Marin is doing to her, it's killing her slowly. The anguish in his eyes was unbearable. How long does she have? Days? Maybe a week at most? Kaelis turned away, his shoulders rigid. She watched him struggle, the king warring with the brother, duty fighting against love. It was strange, seeing him like this. The man she remembered had always seemed so certain, so in control. This version of him was cracking at the seams. "I can't lose her," he said quietly. "She's all I have left." The words hit Revna somewhere soft. She remembered feeling that way about Tam, the night she had walked into the shadows to save him. The terror that had driven her forward despite the danger. "You won't lose her," she said, before she could stop herself. "I'll find a way to get her out." Kalis turned back to her, and the gratitude in his expression was almost worse than the desperation. "Why? After everything I've done to you, why would you—" "Because I know what it's like to love someone that much." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "And because your sister once looked at me like I was worth something, even when her brother didn't." The words landed like a blow. She watched him absorb them, watched the guilt flicker across his face. "Revna, I never thought you were worthless. I never—" "Don't." She held up a hand. "Not tonight. I'm too tired for this conversation, and you're too desperate to be honest. We'll talk about it later, when Alara is safe." If she's ever safe, Revna thought but didn't say. She moved toward the door, but Kalis's voice stopped her. "He spoke to you, didn't he, Marin? In the vision. You heard something you're not telling me." Revna's back stiffened. She should lie. It would be easier. "He mentioned a bond," she said, without turning around. "Said it was supposed to break you, but it didn't work. That you grew stronger instead." Silence stretched between them. "Revna—" "Good night, Kalis." She left before he could explain, before he could offer another half-truth wrapped in desperation. But as she climbed the stairs to her chambers, her mind kept circling back to Marin's words. The bond was supposed to break him. Their mate bond. The one Kalis had publicly denied. The one he had shattered in front of 300 witnesses. What if it hadn't been his choice? What if someone had forced his hand? And what did that mean for everything she had believed for the past 5 years? Revna slept poorly, her dreams tangled with shadows and fortresses, and the echo of Marin's cruel laughter. She woke before dawn, her body aching like she had run for miles, and forced herself through the motions of breakfast. Jorath found her in the training yard an hour later, working through sword forms with a ferocity that made the younger warriors give her a wide berth. "You're going to pull something," he observed, leaning against the fence. "Already did." She switched hands, continuing the sequence. "Left shoulder, doesn't matter." "The veil walk took more out of you than you're admitting." "Probably." Strike, parry, thrust. "What do you want, Jorath?" "The king is asking for you." "Let him ask." "He's been asking since sunrise, very politely, very persistently." Jorath's tone was dry. "I think he's practiced the word please more times this morning than in his entire life." Despite herself, Revna felt her lips twitch. "Good for him." "Revna." Jorath's voice gentled. "What did you see in the Shadow Realm? And don't tell me nothing. I've known you too long." She lowered the sword, breathing hard. The morning air was cold, biting at her exposed skin, but she welcomed the sensation. It kept her present. "I saw his uncle, Lord Marin. The one who was supposed to be executed 15 years ago." Jorath's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected." "He's the one behind the curse, the one holding Alara." Revna wiped sweat from her forehead. "And he said something about a bond being meant to break Kalis. I think he might have been talking about us." "You think Marin was behind the rejection?" "I don't know." The uncertainty gnawed at her. "Kalis keeps hinting that there's more to the story, something he can't tell me yet. And Marin spoke like the broken bond was part of a plan that failed. Would it change things if it was true? If Kalis didn't have a choice?" Revna considered the question. 5 years of pain. 5 years of believing she was worthless, unwanted, and disposable. If all of that had been manufactured by an enemy in the shadows, it would explain things, she said finally. But it wouldn't erase them. I still felt what I felt. I still went through what I went through. Knowing there was a reason doesn't undo the damage. No, Jorath agreed, but it might change how you move forward. She had no answer for that. When she finally went to meet Kaylis, she found him in the library, surrounded by texts she didn't recognize. He looked up at her entrance and she noticed he had changed clothes, attempted to make himself presentable. It was almost endearing, how hard he was trying. Almost. "You've been busy," she observed, nodding at the books. "Research. Anything I could find on Marin, on the Shadow Realm, on Veilwalkers." He stood, and she noticed the dark circles under his eyes had deepened. "Revna, about what you said last night, about the bond. I said we'd talk about it after Alara is safe." "I know, but I need you to understand something first." He stepped toward her, and she held her ground, refusing to retreat. 5 years ago, the night before our bonding ceremony, I received a message. It said that if I completed the bond with you, you would be killed before the next sunrise. Not threatened, not harmed, killed. And it included details that proved they had the means to do it. Revna's heart stuttered. What kind of details? They knew about your veil walking. They knew about your brother, about the night you saved him. They knew where your father lived, where he slept, what routes he took to market. Kalis's voice was strained. They knew everything. And they made it clear that if I didn't publicly reject you, if I didn't make the world believe our bond was a lie, they would destroy everyone you loved. Who sent the message? I didn't know. Not then. His hands clenched at his sides. I spent years trying to trace it, following leads that went nowhere. It wasn't until Celeste died, until the curse started, that I began to suspect Marin. But I still don't have proof. So you broke my heart to save my life. I broke both our hearts. The confession was raw. Do you think I wanted to say those words? To watch you walk away? I felt our bond screaming inside me, tearing apart as you left, and I couldn't do a single thing to stop it. Something twisted beneath her ribs. She wanted to hold on to her anger, the familiar armor that had protected her for years. But it was crumbling, piece by piece, in the face of his anguish. Why didn't you tell me? Send a message. Explain somehow. They were watching. For months afterward, I was monitored. Every letter I wrote was intercepted. Every messenger I sent was followed. He ran a hand through his hair. By the time I finally had freedom to act, you had disappeared. It took me 2 years to find out you were even still alive, and by then, you had built Thornhaven. You were an alpha in your own right. I thought... He stopped. You thought what? I thought you were better off without me. The words were quiet, defeated. You had built something extraordinary. You were thriving. And I was still trapped in Valdris, married to a woman I didn't love, fighting shadows I couldn't see. What right did I have to drag you back into my mess? Revna stared at him. The proud Alpha King, admitting that he had watched her from afar and judged himself unworthy. You're an idiot, she said. His laugh was startled, broken. Probably. Definitely. She crossed her arms. You should have told me. 5 years ago, you should have found a way. I would have fought with you. I would have helped you find whoever was threatening us. I know that now. I was young and terrified and stupid. His eyes met hers. I'm still terrified, but I'm trying not to be stupid anymore. The honesty in his voice was disarming. This wasn't the arrogant king she remembered. This was a man who had been broken by his own choices and was desperately trying to atone. This doesn't fix everything, Revna said slowly. You understand that, right? You can't just explain and expect the past to disappear. I know. I spent years believing I was worthless. That takes time to undo. I know. And if I find out you're lying to me, if any of this is manipulation, it isn't. He stepped closer, and this time she didn't stop him. Revna, I know I don't deserve your trust. I'm not asking for it. I'm just asking for a chance to earn it. Slowly. However long it takes. She studied his face, searching for deception. She found only exhaustion and hope, and something that looked terrifyingly like love. We save Alara first, she said. That's the priority. Everything else waits. Agreed. And you don't get to keep secrets anymore. Whatever you know about Marin, about the curse, about any of it, you tell me everything. Everything, he promised. Good. She turned toward the book spread across the table. Now show me what you've found. If we're going to storm a shadow fortress, we need a plan. They worked through the day and into the evening, piecing together fragments of information. Kalis had brought journals from Valdris, accounts of Marin's original coup attempt, and Revna added what she had learned from her own mother's writings about the Shadow Realm. A picture began to emerge. Lord Marin had always been ambitious, resentful of his younger brother's claim to the throne. When his coup had failed, he had been sentenced to execution, but the accounts were suspiciously vague about the details. No body had been displayed, no grave had been marked. He must have had help, Revna said, tracing a passage in one of the older texts. Someone with access to shadow magic, someone who could fake a death and smuggle him into the Shadow Realm. My father trusted his counsel implicitly. Kalis's voice was bitter. Any one of them could have been a traitor. The female voice I heard in the vision, the one talking with Marin, cold, authoritative, does that match anyone you know? Kalis considered. Lady Vespera. She was my mother's lady-in-waiting before the coup. After Marin's supposed execution, she retired to a distant estate. No one's heard from her in years. Convenient timing. Very. He made a note. I'll send word to Valdris. Have my people investigate. If she's been in contact with Marin all these years. A knock at the door interrupted him. Jorith entered, his expression grave. We have a problem. Scouts just returned from the eastern border. There's movement in the forest. What kind of movement? Shadows. Dozens of them, maybe more, drifting toward Thornhaven. Jorith met Revna's eyes. They're not natural. Our wolves can feel the wrongness from miles away. Revna stood, her blood running cold. He knows. Marin knows I found him. Can your wards hold? Kalis asked. Against normal shadow creatures, yes. Against something sent by a man who's been building power in the Shadow Realm for 15 years? She grabbed her sword. I don't know. They reached the eastern wall as the sun dipped below the horizon. The forest beyond Thornhaven's thorned barrier was alive with movement, dark shapes weaving between the trees like smoke given form. Revna had seen shadow creatures before, the minor ones that slipped through cracks in the veil. These were different, larger, more deliberate. And there were so many. Archers to the walls, Revna commanded. Silver-tipped arrows only. Everyone else, hold the gates. Her wolves moved with practiced efficiency. Thornhaven had been built to withstand sieges, and they had trained for threats both natural and supernatural. But as Revna watched the shadows mass at the tree line, she felt a tendril of fear. This wasn't an attack. This was a message. I know where you are. I know what you're planning. And I can reach you whenever I choose. Kalis appeared beside her, sword drawn. You should stay inside the wards, if they're targeting you specifically. My pack, my fight. She didn't look at him. You want to help? Stay close and don't die. The shadows struck. They came in waves, pouring from the forest like a black tide. The archers loosed volley after volley, silver arrows cutting through the darkness. Each direct hit dissolved a creature, but more rose to take its place. Revna fought on the wall, her blade singing as it carved through shadow flesh. Beside her, Kalis moved with a warrior's grace, covering her flank, matching her rhythm. They had never trained together, never fought side by side, but something in the way they moved spoke of compatibility, like two halves of a whole. The mate bond, she realized. Even broken, even denied, it still connected them. A larger shadow surged over the wall, its form vaguely humanoid, with arms that stretched like reaching branches. Revna ducked under its swipe and drove her blade through its center. It screamed, a sound that vibrated in her bones and dissolved into smoke, but the smoke reformed behind her. "They're regenerating!" someone shouted. Revna's heart sank. Of course they were. Marin wasn't trying to kill them tonight. He was wearing them down, testing their defenses, learning their weaknesses. "Fall back to the inner ward," she commanded. "Seal the secondary gates." The retreat was orderly but costly. 2 warriors fell to shadow claws before they could reach safety. Revna felt each loss like a wound, her pack's pain echoing through the bonds that connected them all. Inside the inner ward, the wards flared to life, brilliant gold against the encroaching darkness. The shadows recoiled, unable to pass, but they didn't disperse. They circled the barrier, patient and waiting. "They'll stay until dawn," Revna said, her voice grim. "Shadow creatures can't maintain form in direct sunlight, but they'll be back tomorrow night, and the night after that." "He's laying siege," Kalis said, "keeping you trapped here while Ilara grows weaker." "Yes." Revna watched the shadows prowl beyond the ward light. "He's forcing a choice. Stay and protect my pack, or leave them vulnerable while I go after his niece." What if there was a third option? She turned to him. "I'm listening. What if we didn't go to the Shadow Fortress? What if we made Marin come to us?" "And how do you propose we do that?" Kalis's expression was hard. "Bait. Something he wants badly enough to leave his stronghold for. Ilara's already his bait for you. What could we possibly offer that—" She stopped. The realization hit her like cold water. "Me," Kalis said quietly. "He wants me. He's wanted the throne since before I was born. If he believes he can take me, capture me, use me to claim Valdris, he'll come himself. That's insane. You'd be walking into his hands. I'd be drawing him out of his fortress and away from my sister." His familiar gray eyes held hers. "And I wouldn't be alone. I'd have you." Revna's mind raced. It was reckless, dangerous, the kind of plan that got people killed. But it might also be their only chance. "Even if we lured him out," she said slowly, "we'd need a way to trap him. Shadow creatures can slip back into the veil whenever they want. We'd need something to anchor him here, keep him corporeal long enough to kill." "What about a veil walk? Can you pull someone out of the shadow realm and bind them in the physical world?" She had never tried. Her mother's journals mentioned it was possible, but the cost was enormous. The risk of losing herself in the attempt was high. "Maybe," she admitted, "but I'd need time to prepare. And I'd need him distracted while I worked the binding." "That's where I come in." They stared at each other, the weight of the plan settling between them. "This could get us both killed," Revna said. "Yes, but it could also save Ilara and end Marin's threat forever." Kalis reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "I'm not asking you to trust me with your heart, Revna. Not yet. But can you trust me with your life?" The question hung in the air. Behind them, the ward light flickered against the shadows. Around them, her pack waited, exhausted and afraid. She thought about the girl she had been, the one who had loved this man with everything she had. That girl had been broken by his rejection, but she had rebuilt herself, stronger, harder, a leader in her own right. Maybe it was time to stop running from the past. "Yes," she said. "I trust you." The relief in his eyes was almost worth the terror in her heart. "Then let's make a plan," she said, "and pray it works." They spent 2 days preparing. Revna pored over her mother's journals, finding the ritual she needed, a binding spell that could anchor a shadow creature to the physical world. The cost was steep: blood, energy, and a piece of her own essence woven into the chains. If it failed, she would lose more than strength. She might lose herself entirely. Kalis trained with Thornhaven's warriors, learning their formations, earning their grudging respect. He didn't demand command or pull rank. He simply fought alongside them, bled with them, and slowly Revna watched her pack begin to accept him. On the second night, she found him on the battlements, staring at the shadows that still circled beyond the wards. "You should sleep," she said, joining him at the wall. "Can't." His profile was sharp against the ward light. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Alara, the way she looked when they took her, the fear in her face. We'll get her back." "You sound certain." "I am." Revna leaned against the stone. "Marin wants you alive. That's his weakness. He'll come for you himself because he can't trust anyone else with something this important. And when he does, we'll be ready." Kalis turned to look at her. In the golden light of the wards, his eyes seemed almost warm. "I never stopped loving you," he said quietly. "I need you to know that. Every day of the past 5 years, every moment I spent with Celeste, every breath I took, you were there. In my mind, in my heart, in the bond that wouldn't let me go no matter how hard I tried to sever it." Her voice caught. "Kalis, I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know." He looked back at the shadows. "If something goes wrong tomorrow, if I don't survive this, I need to die, knowing I told you the truth. All of it. Nothing is going wrong tomorrow. You can't promise that." "No," she admitted. "But I can promise that I'll fight like hell to make sure we both walk out of this alive. And then?" She hesitated, the words catching in her throat. "And then?" "And then we figure out what comes next. Together." The hope that flickered across his face was almost painful. "Together? Don't get ahead of yourself." But she was smiling, just slightly. "One apocalyptic battle at a time." He laughed, rough and surprised, and something loosened in her chest. She had missed that sound, missed the way his whole face changed when he was genuinely amused. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Fair enough." He paused. "When you rebuilt yourself here, when you became Alpha of Thornhaven, did you ever think about coming back? Finding me? Demanding answers?" Revna considered the question. "Every day for the first year. I planned 100 different confrontations. Imagined all the things I would say, the ways I would make you suffer." She shrugged. "But then the pack needed me. The territory needed me. And somewhere along the way, revenge stopped mattering as much as building something that was mine." "I'm glad you didn't come back." She raised an eyebrow. "Not because I didn't want to see you," he added quickly. "Because you deserve to become this, to lead, to thrive without me overshadowing it." His voice softened. "You're extraordinary, Revna. You always were, but now everyone can see it." The sincerity in his words made her pulse quicken. She had spent so long believing she was worthless, unwanted, hearing him say otherwise, hearing him mean it. She kissed him. It wasn't planned. One moment she was standing beside him, and the next her hands were fisting in his shirt, pulling him down to her. His surprise lasted only a heartbeat before his arms wrapped around her, lifting her against him, kissing her back with 5 years of desperate longing. The bond between them flared to life, not the broken thing it had been, but something new, tentative, hopeful, like a flame finding kindling after a long darkness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kalis pressed his forehead to hers. "I thought you wanted to take things slow," he murmured. "I changed my mind." "Revna, don't." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Don't apologize. Don't question it. Just let me have this. Before tomorrow. Before everything goes to hell." He studied her face, searching for doubt. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him. "Okay," he said softly. "Whatever you need." She took his hand and led him inside. Dawn came too quickly. Revna woke in Kalis's arms, his warmth wrapped around her like a shield. For a moment she let herself pretend they were ordinary. Just two people who had found their way back to each other. No shadow curses, no vengeful uncles, no impossible battles ahead. Then reality reasserted itself. "It's time," she said. They dressed in silence, the weight of the coming hours pressing down on them. Revna checked her weapons, her wards, the vials of binding essence she had prepared. Kalis armed himself with the sword his father had carried, the one that had supposedly executed Marin all those years ago. Jorath met them in the courtyard. "The pack is ready. We'll hold the perimeter while you draw him out." "If something goes wrong," Revna started. "Nothing is going wrong." Jorath's voice was firm. "You're my alpha. You'll come back. That's an order." She smiled despite everything. "Since when do you give me orders?" "Since you started making me nervous." He clasped her arm in the warrior's grip. "Fight well. Come home." "I will." The plan was simple in theory. Kalis would position himself outside the wards, visible and vulnerable, a lure too tempting for Marin to resist. Revna would wait in the space between worlds, ready to bind Marin the moment he manifested, and Thornhaven's warriors would be prepared to strike once he was anchored. Simple, except for all the ways it could fail. They took their positions as the sun climbed higher. The shadows had retreated with the dawn, but Revna could feel them waiting just beyond perception, hungry and patient. "He'll come at dusk," she said, "when the shadows are strongest but before full dark. He'll want enough light to see your face when he takes you." "Charming." Kalis adjusted his grip on his sword. "Any last-minute advice?" "Don't die." "I'll do my best." She slipped into the veil, positioning herself in the space between worlds where she could see both realms at once. The physical world was muted here, gray and distant. The shadow realm pressed close, whispering promises and threats. Hours passed. The sun traced its arc across the sky. Revna felt her concentration waver, exhaustion pulling at her edges. Then the shadows moved. They came from the east, a darkness that devoured the fading light. At their center, a figure emerged, tall, regal, wearing robes that seemed woven from nightmares. Lord Marin looked exactly as he had in her vision, except now she could see the full extent of his corruption. Shadow crawled beneath his skin, pulsed in his veins, and had become so intertwined with his essence that he was barely human anymore. "Nephew." Marin's voice echoed across both realms. "You've made this remarkably easy." Kalis stood his ground. "Uncle, you look terrible. And you look like your father. Weak, sentimental, clinging to bonds that only hold you back." Marin gestured, and the shadows surged forward, encircling Kalis. "Did you really think you could lure me into a trap? I've been planning this for 15 years. Every move you've made, I've anticipated." "Then you anticipated this too." Revna struck. She burst from the veil with the binding spell already forming, chains of light and blood wrapping around Moran before he could react. He screamed, a sound of pure fury, as the anchors sank into him, tethering him to the physical world. "Impossible!" He thrashed against the chains. "You can't. The binding requires my mother's blood, my grandmother's legacy. 3 generations of Veilwalkers poured into one spell." Revna pulled the chains tighter, feeling them drain her strength. You thought I was just a tool, a complication. You underestimated me. Marin's eyes blazed with shadow fire. The girl. You came for the girl. How touching. He laughed, cruel and sharp. She's already dying. Every moment she spends in my fortress drains her life force. Even if you kill me, you'll never reach her in time. That's where you're wrong. A new voice cut through the chaos. Ilara emerged from the shadows behind Marin, pale and trembling but very much alive. Beside her stood a woman with silver hair and eyes that burned with power. When Marin left his fortress to come here, his wards weakened. The woman explained, her voice cutting through the chaos. I've been waiting 3 years for that moment. The girl was ready to run. Marin's face contorted. Sarath! Traitor! Survivor? The woman named Sarath corrected. Lady Vespera's former enforcer, until I realized which side would actually win this war. Your patron sends her regrets. She's decided to switch allegiances rather than go down with you. Ilara stumbled toward Kalis, who caught her in his arms. I'm sorry, she gasped. I tried to find help sooner, but... You're alive. His voice cracked. That's all that matters. Marin's struggles grew weaker as the binding drained his shadow essence. Revna felt the spell pulling at her own life force, demanding payment for its power. You think this ends anything? Marin spat. I am Shadow now. Shadow cannot be killed. It can only be... dispersed. Revna drew her mother's knife, the one forged specifically for creatures of the Veil. Scattered into nothing, unable to reform. She drove the blade into his heart. Marin screamed. The shadows around him convulsed, writhing, reaching for purchase as they were torn apart. For one terrible moment, Revna felt his consciousness brush against hers. All his rage, his ambition, his jealousy compressed into a single burning point. Then he dissolved. The shadows scattered on the wind, and the curse that had plagued Valdris shattered with him. Revna collapsed. She was distantly aware of voices, hands catching her, warmth surrounding her. The binding had taken more than she'd expected. Her vision dimmed, her heartbeat slowing. Stay with me. Kalis's voice, desperate. Revna, please, stay with me. She wanted to answer, but the darkness was so heavy, and she was so tired. The last thing she felt was the mate bond, blazing between them like a lifeline, pulling her back, refusing to let her go. Revna woke to sunlight. She was in her own bed in Thornhaven, wrapped in furs that smelled like pine and home. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced, like she had been unmade and reformed at the cellular level. But she was alive. Finally, Ilara's voice came from somewhere to her left. I was starting to think you'd sleep forever. Revna turned her head, wincing at the effort. Ilara sat in a chair by the window, looking healthier than she had during the battle, color in her cheeks, brightness in her eyes. How long? Revna croaked. 3 days. My brother has been absolutely insufferable. Ilara grinned. He hasn't left your side except to eat, and even then, only because I threatened to drag you out of bed and make you walk. Where is he? Joreth finally convinced him to bathe. He should be back any... The door burst open. Kalis stood in the doorway, hair still damp, and shirt hastily buttoned, looking like he had run the entire way. You're awake. Apparently. He crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms, careful of her weakness but fierce in his relief. I thought I'd lost you. The binding took so much, and you wouldn't wake, and the healers said, I'm here. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her palm. I'm here. Ilara slipped out of the room quietly, closing the door behind her. Kalis pulled back just enough to look at her face. The curse is broken. Valdris is healing. Everyone who was corrupted is returning to normal. His voice shook. You saved them. You saved all of them. We saved them. No. He shook his head. I was the lure. You were the weapon. Without you, none of this would have been possible. He pressed his forehead to hers. Without you, I would have lost everything. Revna closed her eyes, letting herself feel the bond between them. It was different now. Stronger. No longer broken or denied, but acknowledged and accepted. Two threads woven together into something unbreakable. What happens now? She asked. Whatever you want. He pulled back to meet her eyes. If you want to stay here, rule Thornhaven. I'll visit whenever you'll have me. If you want to come to Valdris, you'll be welcomed as a hero. If you want both, we'll find a way to make it work. And us? That's your choice. It's always been your choice. His hand cupped her cheek. I meant what I said. I'll prove I'm worthy of your trust, however long it takes. Revna thought about everything they had been through. The betrayal, the years of pain, the slow, terrifying process of learning to trust again, and she thought about the future stretching before them. Uncertain, complicated, but possible. I want it all, she said. Thornhaven, Valdris, you. She smiled despite the tears gathering in her eyes. I want the life we were supposed to have 5 years ago, but better. Because we've both grown, we've both changed, and we can build something new together. The joy that broke across Kalis's face was like sunrise after a long night. Is that a yes? It's an ask me properly and find out. He laughed, the sound bright and free in a way she had never heard from him before. Then he slid off the bed, dropping to one knee beside her. Revna of Thornhaven, Alpha, Veil Walker, the woman who saved my kingdom and my soul. His eyes held hers. Will you bond with me? Not because of politics or duty or fear, but because I love you, because I have always loved you, because I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Yes. The word came out as a whisper, then stronger. Yes. You impossible, infuriating, wonderful man. Yes. He kissed her then, gentle and deep, and the bond between them sang. The bonding ceremony was held at twilight, when the sky was painted in shades of gold and rose. They stood on the battlements of Thornhaven, surrounded by both packs, Revna's wolves and the delegation from Valdris, who had traveled to witness their king's union. Ilara stood beside her brother, tears streaming down her face, and a smile bright enough to rival the setting sun. When they spoke their vows, the words were simple. No grand declarations, no political posturing, just two people promising to choose each other, every day, for the rest of their lives. The bond snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Not a cage, but a door opening. A bridge connecting two souls who had found their way back to each other against impossible odds. That night, after the celebration had wound down and the guests had retired, Revna and Kalis stood together on the battlements. Their battlements now. I keep thinking about that day, Kalis said quietly. When I rode up to your gates, not knowing if you'd see me or kill me. I considered both options. I know. He smiled. But you let me in. Even after everything, you let me in. Revna leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his steadiness, the bond humming between them like music. You showed up at my door desperate and broken, asking for help I had every right to refuse. She tilted her head to look at him. But that's the thing about doors. They're meant to be opened. Even for kings who don't deserve it. Especially for those. She kissed him softly. That's how you find out if they can become someone who does. Kalis pulled her closer, and they watched the stars emerge one by one. 5 years ago, he had betrayed her for power he never wanted, and a throne that had brought him nothing but grief. He had broken her heart, and watched her walk away, believing it was the only way to save her. Now, she ruled beside him. Not as a possession or a prize, but as an equal, a partner, a queen in her own right. He had begged at her door, and she had answered. and together they had built something neither of them had dared to dream of alone. Home. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.